It's called a lance. Hello?
Welcome, everybody, to It's Called a Lance, a podcast where we read through the Dragonlance Chronicles week by week, and then we just have a little book club about it. You know, we just talk about it. So the people I am just talking about it with are Austin co-host and Hauntie. Give it up, everybody. Woo!
Yay! Woo!
So guys, I was in a pep rally.
Yes, it is a pep rally. Now everybody's hyped for you.
Yeah.
Completely hyped.
Super hype.
Yay.
Yeah. So, super broad question. First few chapters.
Yes.
Don't want to get too far into specifics. How have they sat with you guys?
Austin.
Oh, okay. I've been enjoying it so far. I'm not a huge book reader, so, you know, this is a nice start to get back into reading books like when I was a youth. And it's a fantasy novel, and I love swords and sorcery. It's been great so far. Not nearly enough sorcery for my liking yet, but I think that's going to change in the future chapters.
We'll get there, yeah. There will be a lot.
So for me, yeah, God. So, yes. For me, it's interesting because, you know, I've read these books multiple times over my life, and I always forget a lot. And then I find that when I reread them, I pick up on different things and have a totally different feeling about the book. This time, what's really jumping out to me is like the diligent world building. I'm not going to say aggressive world building because I don't think they're particularly aggressive about it, but they're being very diligent in like saying like they're like, oh, the dwarf is definitely going to mention that his how old he is in like one of the first things he says, and the Kender, we're going to learn all about their like cultural weapon immediately, and like everything about how people interpret them as a people right away, like
New roads via a hoopak.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, so they're really. It reminds me that, you know, this was written at a time when a lot of people read fantasy novels, but not a lot of people played Dungeons and Dragons.
Understood.
So stuff like Kender would be like brand new to people, right?
Yeah. When was your last read through? How recent was it?
Probably, I want to say maybe 2015, 2016. Okay.
So not super recent.
Yeah, no. I was in. It was when I was still living in Tokyo for sure. So,
got it. In that case, I think for this first book alone, for the first like 2/3 of it, I think I have more recent memories than you, because I did try and do a Dragonlance reread about 5 years ago, I believe, and I kind of fell off because the first book, to me, feels a little bit like over familiar. I also reread the first book just so many times as a child that you know, it's not the one that really grabs me. I'm really interested in the rest of the series, and you know, things open up a lot after the first books.
They do. I remember. What is it? Dragons of Winter Night. Being my favorite, but I don't remember if it was the book or the art. So
we'll have to do a special episode at some point on the Dragonlance art, because that's a whole topic on its own.
Oh, absolutely.
So without further ado, I guess let's get into Chapter 1. Flint Fireforge and Tanis Half-Elven meet outside the town of Solus. They've not seen each other in 5 years. They discuss their travels since their last meeting, and talk of their friends and how their adventuring band swore to seek the ancient gods, and return in 5 years to share what they'd found. Both Flint and Tanis admit that they had failed. Tasselhoff Burfoot, a Kender, and another member of the old party, finds them on the road, playing a prank on his friends as he does so. The trio is intercepted by a group of goblins working for the Seekers in Solace. Master Toad orders his subordinates to arrest the adventurers for breaking curfew, and then to search them for a mysterious blue crystal staff. Tanis, Flint, and Tass make short work of the clumsy goblins, and learn hints from them that the goblins were working for someone higher up than the Theocrat. They make their way back into town, Tass revealing that he stole Flint's dagger and left it in one of the goblins. So, we get this nice little introductory chapter here where we meet Tanis, Flint, and Tasselhoff. We don't get, all the characters in one go. What do you guys think of these three? Do any of them stand out overly?
Well, Flint has gone in my memory, from lovable old man to a slightly racist uncle, but although I'm much more interested in your pronunciation of the one character's name, just because in my mind, Toad. In my mind, I've always pronounced it Toady because it's got the E at the end. Toady, and that's like a person.
I could have sworn that the E was on the inside. I thought it was like Toed.
Toed.
Am I wrong? Am I misremembering?
I think it was. Isn't it Tode? Okay. Am I misremembering?
This is the first of our many arguments about pronunciation, and they are.
Oh God,
there's going to be a name in the next chapter summary that you guys are going to hear me say. And some of you are going to get real mad, and don't worry, we're going to talk about it right after, and we're going to settle on the pronunciation together, all of us. So I'll say it wrong, and then we'll decide if actually maybe I said it right.
Okay. I mean, I think you probably said it right. I remember in my adolescent brain knowing that a toady is like another word for a henchman, like a subordinate who's like overly obsequious and bootlicking. And so I always assumed that it was Toady because I'm like, well, they don't need the E at the end, right? But
you're right, there is the E.
See, now I don't know. We got to get Weiss on the podcast just so I can ask her.
Yeah, the major characters have pronunciation guides, but not small ones like this.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, not poor Toady, who's just doing his job.
Oh, I'm outnumbered now.
I like that he's so different from what hobgoblins became in D&D eventually.
Yeah.
Too, right? Like he's not like a big buff honorable dude. He's like a greasy,
he's just like kind of he's just a little gross guy.
You want to go and get the staff.
He reminds me of hobgoblins from my first long-form D&D campaign, where they were immediately made subservient to somebody else and then started kowtowing to that dude.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just wish that they had written his dialogue, because they talk about how he has like this thick accent of some kind. And I really wish that they had just written him in like phonetically. So I still want to know. I still want to know what one of these any accent from the world of Kryn sounds like personally.
That's true. So, Austin, what do you think about Flint then?
He's a dwarf. I like dwarfs.
He's a dwarf. Yeah.
Yeah. There are weirdo Austin issues I have, but that is going to be a thing that will always come up with fantasy novels. Mostly backsheaves are not a thing that anyone will ever actually use. They're a bad idea.
We were paying attention to the logistics of the sheaths.
Of course I am. I'm that kind of a freak.
Yeah. So we've got a couple other characters in here as well. Tasselhoff Burfoot, perhaps one of the greatest gnome names ever in fiction. I know he's not a gnome, but yeah. We're in that genre.
It's in that genre, yeah.
Yeah, but if I said Tasselhoff without any context, you'd be like, "Oh, that's a gnome."
Yeah, exactly.
He's very big.
What do we think of
he's very big. Well, I know that he's very big in Germany. It's very popular. Oh, wait. That is David Hasselhoff.
I like to believe. I like to believe that they like Tasselhoff in Germany.
Yeah.
Somebody got very confused one day and like, oh yes, I love this Tasselhoff feller.
Yeah. I feel like he definitely irritates me a little bit more. Not a lot. I'm not a Kender hater, but like, I think that like adolescent me and adult me in my 40s definitely have we receive his colorful personality very differently. But I like how I still like him. I still like the little dude.
Yeah. He's definitely a very child-focused character. I do think the knife gag at the end of the chapter was a good one of like, no, I don't need to get my knife back. They always stink after they're, embedded in a goblin. Besides, it was Flint's knife. That's a good guy. Yeah. That's a good guy.
Yeah. That was funny. And I more or less agree. Like, the older I get, the less I have patience for the weird antics of, things like that. It's why I changed my RPG group so many times.
Mm-hmm.
You got to hang out with more children, Austin. You got to hang out with more children.
Thank you.
Just find some friends who are like in their early 20s
we on this
and hang out with them.
Do not advocate for that.
I here don't advocate for that. No.
There's nothing wrong with hanging out with people in their 20s. What are you talking about?
But that's not what I would define as children.
Yeah, no, I get what that means by children. Anyone under the age of 24 is basically an infant.
Yeah, like they're like zygotes. It's when you start drinking, right? Like,
I wouldn't trust them to make good life choices.
That's true. And then, what do we think of Tanis overall? The last of the three we're introduced to here.
Wow, he seems like a reasonable sort, so I'm immediately already on his side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does he?
Yeah.
Does he come off as kind of the straight man of the group, or?
Yes. Which is probably why I'm like, oh yes, hello, Tanis, I enjoy you.
But we're immediately. This is what I like about this chapter is like it's good that I like that you use straight man because that is absolutely the vibe, but also like it fits this chapter so well because of all the characters we could be introduced to, right? We're introduced to Tanis, of course, who's very, very much like just he's the guy. He's our Aragorn, he's our dude.
Yeah, he's our protagonist.
He's also, as this goes on, he's kind of like you get your classic stock image of the tortured half-elf. That's kind of like he's kind of the one who popularized that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, we also have Flint and Tasselhoff, who are basically like our Laurel and Hardy, right? So it's like so Flint is a bit of a straight man as well, but he's like grumpy about it. Yeah. And I like that they kind of gave us like a little like comic trio here right away at the very beginning.
Yeah,
it sets tone.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting the feeling that this is going to be a super grim, dark book.
There are some times when there's pretty heavy darkness.
Oh, absolutely, and I'm here for that. But it's not going to be the main focus of the book. I'm not gonna get through the book and be like, oh, well, this just made me sad.
So this one,
just you wait.
This next question's kind of more for M and I. Any familiar emotions returning to you, having re-experienced these characters now? Do they hit you the same? I mean, you said that you find Flint a little different, but...
Flint's a little different, but, even Tasselhoff's a little different. Tanis is the same. I've always remembered him as kind of the Captain America, right, or Cyclops of the team. He's just the guy.
Yeah. Reading him as like a 14-year-old boy, Tanis Tanis was my boy. He was my guy, you know? Yeah. And like I read these chapters and I just go, yeah, that's my boy.
Yeah, it definitely still it definitely still conjures up the like that warm, I guess, like honestly like autumnal feeling, like the color scheme of the book itself, like all the reds and oranges. Like for me emotionally, it's very like it's a lot of warm, fuzzy feelings.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm able to sort of actually put myself in it more now that I'm grown than I probably could when I was young. It feels a lot more homey than it did originally. So it's got to add in nostalgia.
Yeah.
You know?
Are you picking up on that at all, Austin, since you're not looking at this through the nostalgia?
No, I absolutely get it. It's that whole thing of revisiting the stuff you used to enjoy as a child, and occasionally getting the lucky note of, oh wow, child me had good taste in a thing for once.
That's always nice. I guess the very last thing I want to figure out before we go in, this is already, we can tell, kind of a subversion of that classic fantasy trope of, the party meets in a tavern, because the party does meet in the tavern, but the story picks up before we get there.
Which I like as a different flavor, because I've played on a lot of D&D games, and boy howdy, how often is and you find yourself in a tavern is the most common fucking trope.
Absolutely.
Well, a big part of it, of course, is because I feel like D&D modules, D&D adventures at the time, the ones that I recall most often started either like low-level adventures, often started either in the tavern or on the road. And so it's kind of good that they're doing both here, basically, because, like, the whole reason you start your party off in the tavern is because, like, back in those days, it was very much an open-world game, and so you needed to get the players into a space where they would hear the rumors that would turn into the plot hooks that would get them on their quest, and tavern was always the place to go for those rumors. So it makes sense that that's where they would be. But with this, I like that we're starting out on the road first, because, like, it is about a reunion, right? Like, there's the whole backstory of, like, they've all been on these individual quests, and we're not being given that backstory yet. And those are their own books. But
by the time we're done with our little chapter segment today, we've got like 8 characters in the party. We can't meet them all at once.
No, definitely not.
Boy, howdy, do I feel bad for that GM, I'm not gonna lie.
I feel like that shaped me as a game master, though. Like, we were joking before we started recording about Session Zeros, and, one of my joys that sometimes gets stepped on a little bit by a Session Zero is, I like it when I don't know who the player characters are. Like, sometimes I like to be able to have to, like, for D&D specifically, I like needing to sit down and be like, how am I going to, like, construct an adventure that, like, weaves these very different personalities, like, together in a cohesive, meaningful way.
Oh, and I get that. I have been getting a little bit into that in one of the other TTRPG groups that I play in. We did not so much sit down and talk about what everyone was playing, and we just kind of showed up with our characters already made. And I try to come up with my personalities as I'm playing the game, because anything I say in, like, Session 0, a week later, I'm like, I don't like that. I'm changing everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, any other comments we want to make on Chapter 1, or should we barrel right on through to the second?
Yeah, let's hit up Chapter 2.
Flint, Tanis, and Tass all file into the Inn of the Last Home, noticing that the people of Solus are on edge, and aren't welcoming them home quite like expected. They're greeted by the 4th member of their party, a massive warrior named Caramon. Ooh, this is the name, isn't it?
This is
Caramon,
the name.
Yeah, I'm going to say it the way I've always said it, damn it. Caramon Majir. It's not how it's said. Their 5th member and Caramon's brother, the mage Raistlin, awaits them at a large table. Raistlin, whose name I think I'm also actually mispronouncing, has changed since the last time they saw him. His skin has turned to a metallic gold, and his eyes changed to hourglasses. Well, his pupils changed to hourglasses. The result of his own personal quest since they last met. Tika Wayland delivers a letter to Tanis, explaining that their sixth, Kitiara, the third Majir sibling, has broken her oath and will not be meeting them in Solus. So I know people say it Majure. A lot of people say Majure is what I've always heard. And I hate Majure.
I have a controversial pronunciation. I'm aware of this. I mentioned this name once in a video and everyone went, "Excuse me, what the fuck?" I've always pronounced it Mahir. And it sounds very elegant to me.
It does sound very elegant.
Karamon Mahir. It sounds great.
Yeah.
And you've pronounced it Majir. And that is also what the community seems to use as the pronunciation. But I looked it up before this, and all of us were deceived, for another
Majure,
pronunciation was created by the actual writers, and it's like Majiri.
Majiri? No, so not Majure.
I don't like it.
But close.
Yeah.
I don't like
like.
I'm just on the Dragonlance wiki right quick, and they do Majir.
They do Majir. That's good. I think just the entire community sometimes just tells an author they're wrong.
Yeah. I could sort of like. I want to know what.
Oh, sorry.
You go first, Austin. No, you go. No, after you.
Oh, no, I was just going to point out people were telling J.K. Rowling how to pronounce her name, so that was always entertaining for me. I mean, screw her, but, you know.
I mean, I've written characters like that in the novel I wrote where, like, I was choosing, like, Greek names, so if an actual Greek person was like, yeah, that name you wrote should probably be pronounced like this, I'd be like, hey, you're the boss.
Yeah.
But, it depends. But yeah, for me, Mahir, like my whole my whole like middle school group of friends, we all said Mahir, and so that just seemed like the most normal thing for me in the world. And then I said it in a video, and suddenly everyone was there, being like, "They're not Spanish." I was like,
"You don't know that. You don't know where they're from."
Raistlin and his brother Karamon sitting down, hoping that their abuela will be coming coming home soon. That'd be a very different book. It'd be a much more heartwarming book, I think.
It would
be much more heartwarming. It'd be like the Pixar version of Dragonlance. It's so good.
So, how are we feeling on the sense of place in Solace itself? We've mostly just seen the tavern so far, but, you know, we get the sense that it's a town in the trees. We've heard about that. We know it's, you know, under some pressure right now. But, you know, what are your thoughts on this place? Do we have a good picture of it? And what are your opinions on the heroes coming home to it?
Austin.
Oh God, why am I always the one to go first?
Because you're the newcomer. We can't jade your opinions yet.
I know. So, in regards to the heroes coming home, I do like that it is a little different, because we heard in the first chapter that things have been changing. They come home, we're expecting a little bit of a warmer welcome than they've got, but everyone's on edge. Everyone's a little more closed off, and you know, like what do you do about that?
It's true. Sometimes you don't change, but the town does.
Exactly.
Everyone in it's been changing, and you've been gone for it.
Yeah, for 5 years, I think, is the amount of time it's supposed to have been gone.
And, like, 5 years is a long time for a lot of things, and you know, for a lot of changes.
It strikes me as a really long time for a party to go do side quests, you know? It struck me when I was young as well that, like, they have, like, why'd they choose 5 years? That's so long. But, you know, it's also in part shaded by Tanis being the one who gets to call the shots. And has a very different recollection of time than the other people in the party.
Yeah, because that gets brought up a lot. I don't know so much in chapter 2, but in other chapters, time does move much differently for a dude who's going to live to be a few hundred years old.
Mm-hmm. But also, keep in mind, too, one thing we didn't see in the first chapter, or we haven't seen at all, really, is horses. These people don't have horses, this group of friends.
Yeah,
they're walking everywhere, and they were going on on epic journeys to find evidence that the gods are still watching. So, they're going to be, if you have to walk to one city and then walk to another city and then maybe walk back and like adventures too, I feel like 5 years
is kind of reasonable.
Enough. Yeah, not an unfair estimate of time.
I mean, realistically, imagine walking from one end of New York City to the other end of New York City. Yeah. That's going to take a long fucking time.
Yep.
Plus, when you're all going on epic quests, like, you don't know how long each person's epic quest is going to last, so you want to overshoot on how much time needs to pass before your reunion anyway, because this isn't like new D&D where they have sending stones and they can like have late night, stone chats.
Oh yes, late night stone chats by the fire.
Yep.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
They haven't spoken to each other at all in those 5 years. Like, they have not
nobody's
seen their
run
friends
into
in
each
time.
other. No one's had converging quests. Yeah, they're
the postal service in Kyrian is just non-existent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And most of them traveled alone. So, aside from Raistlin and Caramon, obviously, and some other characters that we'll meet eventually.
Yeah. So on to these two brothers who are just introduced to us, the twins, Raistlin and Caramon. Majir. I will make a effort to pronounce it the popular way. I may slip sometimes, but
it'll happen.
Yeah, what are our first impressions? I know that Austin in particular was messaging me. You have a couple Raistlin thoughts.
All right, so before we got started, I was kind of against Raistlin because I only heard about him from third party as an edgy boy, and that hasn't changed. My opinion of him being an edgy boy has not changed, but after playing D&D with an old buddy of mine for years and years and years, I understand what he was trying to do with his character and failing each and every time, which is playing Raistlin just badly in every conceivable way. Right. I'm a broody, edgy character and I sit in the shadows. But at least Raistlin is kind of funny with his horrifying snippets and being making people feel uncomfortable.
And as we get through the series... As we get through the series, you'll see he really pulls off being an edgy boy a lot of times. This archetype stuck around for a reason.
Yeah, it's one of the later chapters when they get in contact with the MacGuffin. I can't touch that. I'm too evil on the inside. I'm too dark and corrupted. And I love it. It is great. Yeah. I wish this is the template. If you're going to be an edgy shadow, I hang out in the back of a tavern, which, don't get me wrong, I enjoy playing that character because I've played that character. I assume we all have played that character.
Yeah, of course.
Because we were all edgy teenagers at one point.
It's so true.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking forward to the next generation of edgy teenagers hiding in fifth dimensional corners because everybody's sitting in a shadowy corner and there's 6 people in the party.
What do you think of his twin brother, Caramon?
It's pretty rad. I like him. So I think in the first episode, I compared them to 2 protagonists from Warhammer Fantasy Battles that I really like. Tyrion and Teclis. And I'm definitely getting the vibes from there. That I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Games Workshop probably stole from this. Except, Teclis is not an edgy boy.
That's possible.
Teclis is just a rad fucking dude.
That's true.
Taught humans how to do magic and stuff.
And then he exploded, but that's a different thing.
Okay, nope.
We're not going down that rabbit hole. All right, Hauntie.
Yeah.
You're a Majir brother fan. Brothers fan. Give us your pitch. What's so great?
Well, do you have stubborn stains in your heart that you do not? Raistlin. So, Raistlin is the reason I think I'm goth. Like, I think it's the reason I wore so much black as a teenager.
Yeah, I could see that.
Because I wasn't at the time, but then at some point I decided that a black hoodie and black pants was going to be my uniform for the next 8 years of my life. And it's all Raistlin's fault. I
feel like
adored
it was
him
probably
as a youth.
It was probably a mercy for you, that hourglass contact lenses would not have been a common thing to find.
Oh, dude, yeah, it would have been that and some vampire fangs with the denture glue.
I've said before in talks between yous and me's that we would have got along. I would have beat you up if you started doing that.
Yeah. I adored Raistlin. I really latched on to him. I identified with him very, very strongly as a teenager, as a early young teenager. And lo and behold, when I reread the books, I find that I must have been filtering out a lot of his personality. He does still feel kind of like the older of the two brothers, the more worldly, but just barely now. It used to be, I used to think Caramon is kind of childlike. He's kind of childish. He's not really done a lot of maturing yet. He hasn't done a lot of growing, whereas his brother seems very, very smart and intelligent and of the world. And now I'm no, he's also kind of an idiot teenager still. He's just the smart, he's just the super intelligent, gifted idiot teenager, right? The thing he doesn't have a lot of is emotional intelligence necessarily, so he's leans entirely on his academic intellect, and which is why he looks down on all of his friends, but also something that I remember feeling was that even when I was young, I always felt oh man, his friends all pick on him. Why? That sucks. No wonder he's such a... But, he actually is as much of, let me filter my language. He's as much of a jerk to his friends as they are to him. Right? It's very clear that he is their best friend's brother. Right?
Yeah.
He's not actually a part of their circle. But that seems to be because he has done his fair share in terms of alienating them as they've done at alienating him. Something that I missed the first time I read the books.
I mean, when I started reading, he's instigating a lot of this.
Yeah.
He's definitely an instigator. And that is an entertaining character. I'm not going to lie. In our fucking Imperium Maledictum game, I get to be an instigator.
Yeah.
It's a great character.
Yeah. So, for the listeners here, and also for Austin, if you weren't aware, there's a very bad Dragonlance cartoon that was made at some point. But the only good thing, and this is just a gift to all of you visualizing Raistlin moving forward, they gave him the voice of Kiefer Sutherland, and it was perfect. It was perfect. It's my gift to you. You just picture that voice as Raistlin.
Oh, thank you, Kiefer Sutherland.
So moving on with Raistlin as well, we have seen that the book is already kind of making, kind of setting his powers up to be a little more significant than your average wizard. What are your thoughts on this ordeal that happened to them on their personal adventures? We get a little bit more about what happened to him and what they were doing than most of the other cast.
Yes. I think that, it's... Well, Austin, again, you go first. It's first impressions. You have the firstest of first impressions.
So, my first views and just first hearing about him is he sold a part of his soul to gain more power. That's what I'm kind of gathering from this. It's the we're taking something from you to give you more power. And of course, it costs him not only like something on the inside, it cost his physical health. And it permanently marked him to show that, well, he is different from everyone else around him. I don't know how much I got there. I'm mostly just kind of going off what I sees.
It's a good theory.
Yeah. I think that I mean, I know his whole shtick, and yeah, I think, you know, for any D&D playing listeners who are familiar with 5e, like, he definitely is at this point kind of like a weird sort of what we would understand, I think, nowadays is either like a wizard or maybe a warlock or maybe a cross-class, multi-class character who's both.
Yeah.
He, I think it's hard not to imagine the players at a table.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's the one guy who shows up with this, like, edgy wizard, and he's just like, yeah, and his skin is gold, and his hair is, like, white, and his eyes, the pupils are shaped like hourglasses. And then he just, like, exposits everything, like, about his character. Like, he's like, I have power now, and this magic staff. Ha 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 ha.
Yeah,
you know,
like a little comment in the book that Raistlin seemed to, like, be enjoying the fact that his appearance was making people uncomfortable. You can picture the player going,
yes.
Like I said, in the old group I had, that was 100% what my body would do. And the worst part, he was not very good at the exposition part. He was really bad. Because, we were all edgy teenagers, but he just never got past that point.
Right.
Yeah. But I think that what I think that I like the most, though, is on a reread, probably every reread, honestly, is that it really does, though, get into Raistlin's showmanship. Like, it's never explicitly called out, but it's hinted at a lot throughout the series that he's got a lot of showmanship in him. He could have been like a stage performer potentially, right? If he hadn't been born so probably sickly. If he probably hadn't been like a sickly bullied kid, he probably would have been like extremely charming, right?
What was it that
and like dramatic?
Clint had said was that Raistlin's half charlatan himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so he's kind of a performer, and we see that even in his character now from the very, very beginning, where they're like, his first word, they're like, "Will you tell them, Raist?" You know, his brother, and he's like, "Yes." He didn't need to say yes like that, but he wanted to, because he's like trying to like set up he's trying to build a mythology around himself now, right? And it's amazing to me, actually, that especially in a time where so many fantasy authors will just kind of like plow ahead with their stories without necessarily knowing where they're going. And it takes them years and years and years to finish a book that everybody wants. Not naming names. It seems like they really had an extremely profound understanding from page one of like who the characters are deep down inside and who they are going to grow up to become. Because I'm seeing a lot of his character arc already, and not just the character arc, but like the subtle nuances of his personality and history are really coming out here in this chapter. And I like that a lot, actually, as far as the writing goes. It's much stronger writing than I remember it being, for sure.
So, we've talked extensively now about the two Majir twins, but there is a third Majir, Kitiara.
Yes.
And this chapter ends with a letter saying that she's not coming. And this kind of bleeds into the discussion of the next chapter, but let's discuss it here because the next chapter is a little bit longer. How does the Kitiara stuff strike you guys? Are you invested already in this character who didn't make it? How are you feeling about her?
I am, yeah. And I do kind of like Raistlin and his kind of pointing it out. And not necessarily in a polite way, Because he's a jerk, and I don't hate a jerk character.
Sometimes we enjoy one. We get a little bit of Tass's obliviousness. Again, this is kind of in chapter 3 here.
Yeah.
But we're hinted at this little romance with Tanis, and by hinted I kind of mean sledgehammered.
It's hinted, like, somebody's hinting at you by drop kicking you in the face.
Exactly. Just a hint of a drop kick.
Yes. It's a bad omen, and it's a nice bit of drama to, I think, end chapter on. Where Flint is like, well, that's it, we're all fucked.
Well, way to go, heroes.
I remember this really struck me when I was reading this when I was younger. For number one, just the way that Flint said it, I was like, oh my god, oh no, this is a big deal. And then there was also... I mean, now I actually consider it to be kind of good writing that the character that Tanis really wants to see the most is the only one who didn't show up. But back then, I had kind of graduated from, like, Kenneth Oppel books when I finally read Dragonlance. And, those were kind of like... they had a little bit of romance in them. And, I kind of liked that in my books. And then I read this and I was like, oh, the romance character isn't here? What a ripoff.
Yeah, well, it's the absence makes the heart grow fungus or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There will be a lot to go on here. Lots goes on with our little Tanis boy.
Oh yeah, no, he definitely
He played as a character. I think he's probably one of my favorite straight men in fiction.
Yeah, no, like I said from the outgo, I'm really liking Tanis. He's probably going to end up being at least tied for maybe third. He's in the top 3.
Fantastic. Let's get into chapter 3 then. The party go over Kitiara's letter. She is sworn to another lord and is unable to reconvene for that reason. A past relationship is implied between her and Tanis. The 7th and final member of the party, Sturm Brightblade, a sworn knight of the disgraced Solamnic Knights, enters the tavern. He is dressed in ancient armor and wields an antique blade that he hadn't had before they separated. Sturm gallantly has escorted a pair of plainspeople into the tavern, both dressed in finely made barbarian furs, and the woman carrying a staff. Sturm admits that he too failed to find either his father or the gods. The barbarians he's entered with were a chance encounter outside town. Sturm brought them here to rest as they looked exhausted and confused. The woman is Goldmoon, the daughter of a clan chief, and the other is Riverwind, a hunter of excessive height. The old man from the prologue sits by the fire, and a child asks him if he has any stories. The old man deflects to Goldmoon, and asks her to sing a song for the tavern. Goldmoon's song is a tale of magic, healing, and her forbidden love for Riverwind. The old man follows it up with the tale of the ancient god Paladine and the knight Huma. The High Theocrat from elsewhere in the tavern emerges, accusing both the song and the story of blasphemy. He drunkenly accuses Goldmoon of witchcraft, and in his attempt to seize her, ends up falling into the fireplace. Tasselhoff takes Goldmoon's staff and whacks the burning Theocrat to the ground so that people can smother the fire. The staff instead heals the Theocrat and then glows like blue crystal. The raging Theocrat declares it to be further witchcraft, and he calls the guards. Tanis and his party help the plainsman escape, further assisted by Tika. They hide in Tika's house, and confirm the staff's healing powers by using it to heal the scrapes and bruises they took in the escape. Okay, so this was an eventful chapter, and we've got a few new characters to work with. Sturm Brightblade. He's an interesting character. He comes off very strongly right at the beginning. He's a very gallant knight. Does he come off, you guys think, as a little bit of a cartoon character?
A cartoon character.
He always struck me as a bit of a cartoon knight.
But no, But that's because I grew up playing a lot of Final Fantasy IX, and Steiner was my favorite character in that game. So anytime I'm given a knight, I'm immediately in love with a knight that acts old knightly. And as a Warhammer Fantasy player, as soon as they described him with a glorious mustache, I'm immediately hooked.
Have you seen pictures of this mustache? It is a lot.
It is mustachios, straight up mustachios. Yeah.
Give me a second. I'll be back in a moment.
You're doing some Googling. Off to M then while he Googles.
Sturm for me, I can see. Hey, I can see what you mean by like cartoon character. I was going to bring this up. How I feel like a lot of these characters coming back are like something that needs to be kept in mind. Right? Is that they're all still quite young.
Yes.
Right.
Sturm's 29, and he's already like, he's old for his age.
Well,
he is. He's one of the oldest, technically, like in terms of maturity, because like Raistlin and Caramon are still quite young, if I recall. And
absolutely,
25. Yeah,
they're not very worldly.
Sturm is described as like 29, but looks about 40.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that, I think, a lot of his sort of cartoonishness in terms of his knighthood, I later on we'll learn more about that. But I like it because I feel like a lot like Raistlin, actually, he's kind of putting on, I think, a performance for people. He's kind of like, but it's less for everyone else and more for like himself. Like, I feel like this isn't who he actually is. Like, right, there's another person in there who's trying to like be something, and
that gets reinforced in chapter 6, of course, where he kind of has an internal dialogue about how he loves Tanis so much because Sturm feels like he's following a code to try and be a certain person, whereas he thinks that Tanis just is that person.
Right. And and on top of that, as we may see in later books, even his image of who he is, of not who he should be, but his image of what a Solamnic knight is may not be totally accurate for this point in the story. And I like that they did that, because there's always, of course, with knights, especially in fantasy, there's this tendency to sort of have them embody the sort of the chivalric ideal, right, through and through. Every knight is a knight of the round table in fantasy. But they really do, I think Weiss and Hickman here, I like that they're drawing some attention with Sturm right now. And again, you would only notice this on a read through, perhaps, a second read through. But they're giving him some, how to say it? They're using him to sort of indicate that, like, that fantasy may just be a fantasy.
Yeah.
Right? And I like that. I like that a lot. Where, like, he's clearly performing. He seems like a flat character. There's got to be a reason for it. In the same way that Raistlin seems like kind of a flat character hinting at.
Sturm's one of my favorite characters in this. I'm very excited for Austin to see the whole story.
Back in the day, he was the favorite. He was was he? Yeah, he was the favorite when Weiss and Hickman got written to about characters by the fans. Overwhelmingly, it was typically about Sturm.
And I can't blame them looking at that glorious fucking mustache. Like, oh my god.
There are still older D&D nerds out there who, like, really dedicated Dragonlance fans who actually, like, some of them very, very heartwarmingly and others kind of problematically, like, pattern their personality off of Sturm and this like Solamnic code, in the same way that Star Wars has some super fans who pattern their way of their worldview after the Jedi, right? Like, he has an outsized influence among of all the characters on the readership.
We're going to not spoil anything, of course, but the way Sturm's story goes makes everything in his story much stronger in retrospect. It's one of those stories that once you've seen the whole thing through, you'll understand what you've just been looking at.
Yeah, exactly. He, more than any of the other characters, is a triptych, right? Like, we have the 3 books and the 3 versions of the characters, and we're gonna see a lot about them.
Absolutely. And Sturm brings with him into the inn, he brings us Goldmoon and Riverwind, our star-crossed plainsman lovers. How do these two hit for you both? Do you think Goldmoon's song gets across kind of their situation well enough?
Yeah, I do. Again, like, I don't know, like, the names are just a little much for me, but I get where they're coming from. It's just a personal thing for me. I don't know.
It is a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it is certainly a little bit uncomfortable that like they were trying to. Because it's classic fantasy. You want some barbarians. That's fun,
right?
And they base them off of Native Americans, which is a little mixed by modern standards.
Yeah, it makes me a little like. Well, I don't want to say it's offensive or anything, because, I mean, I am a cisgendered white dude. But, I don't know. It just makes me a little uncomfortable, but yeah, that is just a me thing.
I think there's an interesting tension there. I mean, I think, one, the books were written, in the late 70s? This book, I think, was probably written in the late 70s.
70s, 80s.
So, of course, a lot of people were very... At that time, a lot of people were super fascinated. They still exist, but were very fascinated with Native American culture. And it still seemed very mythic to a lot of people, of course, because they didn't understand, like, no, these people are still alive. They're still, But I think there's an interesting tension with these kinds of characterizations in general in fantasy, because, like, on the one hand, it's like, well, okay, but... this is kind of problematic, isn't it? Framing them as like the barbarians. But on the other hand, they're making an effort to be inclusive of them, which is partially, I think part of it, a big part of it is Tracy Hickman's Mormon background coming through, of course, because we know that, well, anyone who's really looked into Mormonism knows that Native Americans play a not outsized role in the sort of the mythology of the Mormon faith, right?
Right.
And so it would make sense for them to show up in the books. What gets me, though, as problematic personally, and I don't know if I still don't know in my heart if this is the fault of the writers or the fault of the artists, but I feel that Goldmoon is sort of creates a problem with her appearance, because like she's described as like blonde and fair compared to like Riverwind. Like Riverwind is always portrayed visually and in the text as like he's very much like a Native American dude, right? Like, in fact, he's probably like his image is probably lifted from like a number of like those Old West paintings of like the lone Native American like horseman, leaning forward on his horse, right? But then Goldmoon is kind of depicted visually always as just this like white blonde girl. And it's supposed to be like
American.
Like see how special she is, and so I'm just like, and I know that Margaret Weiss wanted both of them to be sort of a an indistinguishable, to be at some indistinguishable center point between like the Native Americans and the Celts, which I think is an interesting potential combination for world building if you're going to take elements of both. But like the fact that they each end up on the complete opposite side of that like spectrum that is set up, instead of being in the middle, is like that for me is sort of where my brain goes. I don't like these characters as much.
I as a teenager, that's definitely how I pictured them, as kind of the like racially ambiguous kind of thing. I didn't think of them as any particular ethnicity. But now in modern days where we think about this stuff a little bit more, it's a bit strange.
Yeah.
Especially making them like plainsmen, like they're clearly meant to be like plains Indians, right? They're like supposed to be a dark-haired, dark-skinned people from the plains, and they wear like, all of this, although everyone in Dragonlance wears leather with fringe, but based on the art, but it's a thing.
Again, I'm going to the Wikipedia for most of my character image looking up, and like, oh yeah.
So, all that being said, as people, what do you guys think? As people,
I like them. I think they're the first characters we're introduced to who really feel their age. Like,
yes.
They are young and in love and fleeing something, and that only a couple of like young idiots would have even fallen into in the first place, and it's seen in the way they interact with everybody around them. Like, I think it could be tempting to be like, oh well, they're these tribal people from like an uninhabited plain, right? Like not uninhabited, but like unsettled, right? Like there's no like permanent cities or anything, and that's why they are so wide-eyed, or they seem to be like not entirely in touch with everything around them. But really, it's just because they're young and kind of immature, like both of them. Like Riverwind more than Goldmoon, but like Goldmoon is pretty naive as well at this point.
It's true.
Oh yeah,
and I like that about them. I like that they kind of show up to remind us, like, oh, actually, like. These people are all in sort of like their mid-late 20s, but like they are also all kind of kids. Like
which I can definitely see coming across. I mean, growing up like in a rural area and moving to a city, there is that bit of a cultural shock, and I can kind of see that coming in as a doohickey.
Absolutely. So, and as these two are doing their thing in the tavern, the High Theocrat steps in. And we've been hearing a lot already about kind of how empty the Seeker faith is, and we really see it on full display here. What do you guys think about the way that kind of religion as a topic has been explored in this first segment?
Different. I know. Incredibly vague answer right there. So, in a lot of fantasy settings, either the gods are kind of a big deal, or they're just not touched up on. In this one, the gods are clearly, they're not here anymore, and that's a problem for a lot of people. And even when you look at today's, a lot of people are still looking for religion in some kind of way. So I get where they're coming from with having the likes of a High Theocrat. We're talking about the new gods, and you have people looking for the old gods.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, they really drive it home, right, by making his personality perhaps as, like, as close to 180 degrees from what you would expect of a religious leader in a fantasy setting to be, right? We would expect a religious leader to be merciful and kind and patient and understanding and wise, especially if you're coming from a D&D background where like there's actual stats that matter for these kinds of characters. And yet he's arrogant and cruel, and he jumps to conclusions very quickly. It's obvious that he's just a shitty local bureaucrat, basically, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's I think it's the best way possible for them to sort of immediately be like, to introduce this concept of the Seekers.
Yeah.
And then without having to get into a whole lot of world building, they can just tell us immediately, he's a Seeker, and by the way, the Seekers are assholes, because he himself is obviously some kind of horrible person.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to revisit this topic a little later on in this book, because I feel like I feel like, based off of my memories of how this story progresses, there's some cool places this goes that explores this topic of how faith works and stuff. But we don't have a complete vision of, I think, what the book is saying quite yet. But we're building up to some neat stuff.
It is going to be interesting. So, again, I've played a lot of tabletops. I'm not sure if you guys have been able to tell that. It is going to be interesting to see how clerics work in this setting.
Yeah.
My lips are sealed.
Yeah, as right they should, because I don't know the answer. And it's also why I will not read the comment section.
Gotcha. Okay, well, let's go into chapter... Yeah, I'll pick out comments and give them to Austin. Austin, you don't read the raw thing.
Oh, yeah. Well, no. I just assumed that everyone who's making a comment is saying something super mean and hurtful about me, so I just refuse to read them.
Stay with that opinion. It will keep you out of the comment section and away from spoilers.
I know. Well, it's yeah.
So let's get into chapter 4. And this is a real quick one.
The party discusses the nature of healing magic, which has been lost since the Cataclysm. Guards barge into Tika's house, and Raistlin savagely kills them with a spell. The group tries to decide on a plan. Riverwind and Goldmoon wish to go to Haven, so they may ask the Seekers there about this blue crystal staff. The group commits to head to the northern crossroads and decide if they are coming along as well. The party makes proper introductions to the two plains people before setting off to the crossroads.
Much shorter chapter, as we said. The heroes all went to find the gods and failed, and now they have kind of lucked into finding this healing magic that has been lost for a really long time. I guess let's start with Austin right away. This one's for you. Where do you see this story of, what's missing in the world and this new healing magic? Where do you see the story going from here?
Well, all right, so this is clearly a magical MacGuffin, right? That is the be all end all.
Yeah.
My thoughts are, it is some part, piece, or regalia from some long dead deity that by sometime around near the end of a book will restore some kind of gods to the world to bring back glorious healing magics.
Interesting theory.
Yes.
From somebody's chuckle, I'm either super wrong or super right.
Indeed.
We can tell you nothing.
You should tell me everything. You're just choosing not to.
It's true. Hauntie, any thoughts on this magic?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, of course, as a kid, I thought it was extremely compelling. A magic staff is super cool. It's the next coolest. It's
blue.
It's the next coolest
they
thing
talk
too.
about it.
Yeah, like magic staffs are like the coolest thing next to like a magic sword, right? You have your magic sword is like number one in fantasy, and then after that, it's like magic staff, and they've got 2 in the book already. So, like, I'm super sold, and I'm so into it, and I like it a lot. In terms of MacGuffins as well, because it's like, on the one hand, like I would say that it's not a MacGuffin. I know Austin jokingly called it one earlier, but like, I don't think it is, because it actually has like purpose and use as well. Like, it has that role. It's an important item that is sort of like a compass mark, right? It's a plot hook. But it has a purpose. It's a magic item. It's part of this person's kit, right? It's not a thing that they're seeking. It's a thing that they've already acquired, and they've got to figure out its story and what's going on, because of course healing magic hasn't been available to the people of the world of Dragonlance for a long time, and that means they've been relying on medicine, which, if we're thinking about a medieval-esque world, or a Renaissance-esque world, that's not going to be great for people. No. That's not going to be great for people. And we're living in a fantasy world where, like, a toothache, like a tooth, a bad tooth could kill you, right? And still.
Both of those get brought up. I think once they say, hey, maybe we should use the magic staff on Raistlin. And he's like, "Nah, it's not going to work, homies. This is something completely different. No weird wizard magic is going to heal this." And I know I think it is in chapter 5 or 6, they go into a bit about Raistlin drinking some magical herbal tea.
Yes,
sans the magic. Yeah. It's just a weird herbal tea.
It's just herbal tea. Yeah. And it's in fact the recipe exists in a supplement book, but
oh, cool.
I don't think I want to try it.
You can actually make the tea. It's just it's just like a herbal tea. It's just an herbal tea, but tastes a lot. It's very planty, but yeah, I like it, and also Raistlin gets zapped by it, of course.
Of course.
Which is, I think a nice reminder of, like, I, of course, as a D&D player, I love alignment, the alignment system, and I know a lot of people hate it, but I'm like, this is part of why it's so good, because it can be used to create drama, right? Like, he's a neutral aligned character, and he touches the thing that only good characters can touch, and he takes like a D4 or 2D4 damage or something like that because he's not good.
Mm-hmm.
That's flavor. Perfect,
oh man,
are
we going to be throwing hands now?
There is a little quirk there, of course, which suggests that maybe it's not quite what Raistlin's theory is, because when they smacked the Seeker, who is not exactly pure-hearted, he got healed.
Yes. He did get healed, it's true.
Yeah. I'm going with, I don't think Raistlin has all of his soul, and that's why it's just getting a little it's getting a little weird.
That's possible.
I mean, I know it's tabletop stats, but
you will find that is what I'm comparing all of these books to. Like, in my head, I know this was written for either original D&D or AD&D. Everything in this game is being converted into 3.5 logic. It's why Strum is the knight class, which is a terrible class, but I love it so very much.
So I think too, one thing that we probably could have asked in the last chapter, I suppose, is why, because it's the old man, right, who tells Tasselhoff to to hit the guy with the staff. What more weird stuff that he knows.
He's concerned with the old gods, which nobody believes in anymore.
Yes. Yeah, weird.
Yeah, because he's not Gandalf.
And he kind of disappeared during the scuffle. He didn't go with everybody.
It's true.
Yeah, because he has more important things to do. A wizard arrives exactly when he means to.
In addition, another person we left back at the inn is poor Tika Whalen. Her house has been utterly ruined by all of this.
Yeah.
Yes. She's obviously been kind of a minor character. And she's, despite that, kind of gotten a disproportionate amount of screen time. Do you guys think, based off of what we've read right now and like how much characterization has gone into what the characters have been saying about her, do we have a good read on Tika?
Yeah, she's going to become a member of the adventuring party. She is so at the game table. She is the one of a player's friends who's still not completely sure if they want to hang out with a bunch of nerds sitting around a table, rolling oddly shaped dice and arguing about the results. So she sits in on a couple of games. They talk about, this is the kind of character you can make. She experiments, makes a character, and eventually she'll be like, okay, I'm in.
I mean, sort of. You're not entirely wrong. I mean, the original modules, the tabletop modules, had a ton of pre-generated characters, of player characters. more than you would normally have seated at a table. And this, of course, comes back from the days where in AD&D, where players would often control multiple player characters. Yeah. Because you'd have your henchmen and your hirelings and things as well as your main character. It wasn't just one PC per person. And so there is an element of that. Like, she's definitely, a protagonist who just isn't the one who she's being controlled by the game master right now, right? So like the game master is doing the responsible thing and not giving her a lot of the action because it's about the players.
Yeah.
But she's going to get, I like Tika a lot. She's real good. She's real good.
She's real good. Yeah. All right, let's move on to chapter 5 then.
Okay. Oh, they killed so many people in chapter 4. Oh, man.
Yes.
Come on,
we
can
talk about it. We
should maybe. I just want to say, like, we definitely learned that Caramon's got that for the old gamers out there, he's got that 18 (00) strength because he fucking like grabs 2 goblins and then does the thing where like you hit their heads together. Right? Like in movies, except that, like, in his case, he actually kills them by doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, they murder more innocent goblins who are literally just doing their job trying to keep the town safe. Sure, these goblins are a little sus and they were planning on breaking into some houses, but they have skipped over a couple of other houses. Now, man, these are just day laborers. Kind of. I mean, yes, are they working for the quasi, well, not even a quasi, are they working for the theocratic overclass? Yes. But, like, man, they probably pay taxes.
Do they?
I don't think
I assume so. I don't know.
Raistlin casts a little spell at them and then they just die.
Yeah, because he has power word to kill, because nobody understood, like, power levels.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, they understand power levels. There's a lot you don't know yet.
I guess that, because I know in this chapter that we're going to be talking about, he casts a sleep spell.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so we had power word to kill, and then the first level sleep spell, and I'm like, okay, well, like, this is disproportionate.
Mm-hmm. But did Raistlin kill anyone in chapter 4? I don't think he actually did.
Didn't he? I thought he said some magic words. A couple of the guards fell over, and then I think Riverwind was like, "Are they dead?" And he went, "Yeah, I'm afraid so. I killed them."
No. That's okay. So, no, it's because I have the book open right now. It's Raistlin casts a magic spell that causes his staff to light up, which is its primary ability that we'll see throughout the series of it just being a flashlight. And it startles the goblins, and then Caramon comes up behind them, grabs them each by the head, does the movie head smashy thing, but he does it too strong, and so they're like, and Tanis is like, "Are they dead?" And Caramon's like, "Yeah, I hit them too hard.
I got my Majir mixed up."
Yes, which is neat because I think it shows that, you know, it's interesting that, like, when Flint and Tasselhoff are killing goblins, they're like, "Oh God, they smell so bad, but let's get them all," right? But when Caramon does it, he's actually kind of like bummed out that they're dead.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, he's actually kind of sad. He wasn't trying to kill them.
Yeah. Because these goblins are just doing their shitty day job, and they're waiting to go home to see their goblin wives and their goblin kids, and now they're dead. They had 2 days before retirement, Em.
It'll be interesting to see who's working for who eventually.
I have not read any of these books, and I'm just going off what I see. It's like, people just need to leave the goblins alone.
Okay, right. we can respect that opinion. Okay, now let's get into chapter 5. The party flees into the night down the dark road, pursued by the goblin guards. It's clear that they can't do this all night. Goldmoon and Riverwind were already exhausted when they entered Solus, and that's before Raistlin is considered, who can barely keep up this pace on the best of days. Tass suggests that the team takes a boat he knows about across Crystalmere Lake to shelter in the caves until morning. Tanis agrees with the plan, but knows that Flint is the sticking point. The old dwarf had nearly drowned years before when a teenaged Caramon had tipped their boat, and he has had a devout hatred of boats ever since. The party prepares the boat, and they try in vain to convince Flint to come with them. Flint instead plans to flee for the hills and escape that way. Although Caramon wishes to drag him aboard, the party bids their farewell to Flint. Just as they set off, the goblins arrive sooner than expected. Flint panics and attempts to wade in after the party. The dwarf nearly drowns a second time before Caramon pulls him aboard. They escape across the lake, with Flint nearly catatonic with fear. As they stare up at the skies, the group notices that 2 constellations are missing: the Queen of Darkness and the Valiant Warrior. The Boat Chapter. Flint and the Boat Chapter. We see some suggested history already in this, from this story, about the group's dynamics in the past before they re-met. Does Caramon feel like the same Caramon? Does he feel like he's grown a bit since he was reckless and dumped Flint overboard?
I mean, I'm going to say yeah.
Yeah?
I mean, people change, and he was a teenager, and I've made poor life decisions while I was a teenager. Never on a boat because I was too smart to go on a boat. We're land-based mammals. We weren't meant to go on the water. That's where the fish live.
Right.
That's their home.
Yeah.
They don't come on our home. We shouldn't go on their home. I'm just saying.
I would generally agree. I think Caramon, to me, definitely feels like someone who, a couple years ago, might have done some really dumb things.
He feels like he was a frat bro party guy, and then he, hit senior year, mellowed out, and, he's still a dumb muscle jock, but he's a little more chill.
I think for me, it feels more like he's taken a lot more responsibility for Raistlin. Probably with the whole stuff at the tower, because Raistlin was always frail, but not like this.
Yeah. I think that, my perspective on the character is that he, I don't necessarily want to say that he's grown a lot since that time in his backstory, actually. Because I think, we see a lot of his personality. He's still written as a sort of a very childlike, I say, they're all kids, and they are, but also they're all adults, right? But Caramon is always kind of written as maybe more childlike, right? He's very naive. Whenever he's with his brother, at least. But he can't possibly be that naive, right? So I think that he's one of these characters who, whatever growing happened during their 5-year adventure, I think most of it was him sort of taking on this sense that he has to be the one he's his brother's caretaker, right? That's kind of his identity now, is that he's just there. He and his brother are a little bit codependent. And I think he extends that. It's become such a strong part of his personality that one, he extends that to everybody, right? He is kind of a caretaker. He's the friend who's just there and wants everybody to be happy and healthy. But also he hasn't had a lot. I think a lot of his innocence comes from the fact that he hasn't had a lot of time to self-actualize, right? Caramon has not yet become Caramon, truly, as a fully fleshed person. Because he's putting so much of his effort and energy into the people around him and not enough into himself. He needs to do a little bit of self-care, right?
I think that was actually the next thing I was going to ask you guys is for your thoughts on the relationship between the twin brothers, because I think this chapter, it starts to become a lot more clear.
Yeah.
It is very much as Em said. They're codependent on each other. One is, from what I remember reading, Raistlin is a little more less okay with it, but he understands that he really needs his brother.
Yeah,
because
that's where the resentment comes from.
Yeah. It's that whole, well, you were born stronger, healthier, yada yada, and I was weak, and there's that definitely jealousy there. That Cameron is like, nah, Cameron is like, no, we're brothers. We got to look after each other. It is the Raistlin is definitely the I'm the younger brother, and my older brother is the attractive sporty guy, where I'm the edgy kid who plays D&D.
Yeah. Which was me and my younger brother when I was reading these books as a child.
It was me and my older brother, so I get it.
I had a younger brother, and I was always on Team Caramon. I was like, stop being mean. He's just trying to help you.
But it never works like that. Because in our defense, we're children and we don't understand.
I think the writing of this dynamic is so fascinating because everyone just like, it's like the blue dress, gold dress thing. Everyone looks at it and is like, oh, I know which one's in the right. 3, 2, 1, and you all give the opposite answer.
Yeah, exactly. And isn't that how it often is in real life with these kinds of dynamics between people?
Exactly.
Where two people need each other, and one of them is giving up too much of themselves for that to serve that equation, and the other one resents it for even being a situation in the first place. But like neither of them can exit it. Like
it's quite real, isn't it?
It's super real.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, moving on from that, we've already seen that Tanis kind of had to manage Sturm back at the tavern.
Yes.
Well, we have to run because Sturm, there's a lady to protect. And now, in a similar way, the team has to attempt to manage Flint and get him into the boat. Is it just me, or is this like constant party cohesion in like inconvenient ways, not even like big character like moments, but just these small little disagreements?
Oh, absolutely.
Is this like distinctly more like D&D than other fantasy novels?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
100%.
Where they're negotiating.
They have
we're
to
negotiating basic things. Because we all play in a group together, and I'm sure we've either subconsciously or consciously have done this with each other.
Yeah.
Of like, why are you doing this? No, we need to do it like this. Why are you being an idiot?
Right.
Exactly.
Well, this is the oldest form, right? This is the most benign form, I think. One which I support at the table of the it's what my character would do conversation. Right? Like, where they're like, oh, we've got to run. And then the one guy who plays a character who's got a specific code of honor is like, I am not going to run. And then everyone's like, why? And he's like, well, because it's what my character would do. Like, this is their code of honor. Like, they have to stand and fight. And so then someone else at the table is like, okay, rather than call you, this is why I like it. It's like, rather than call you an asshole, I'm just going to be like, okay, but fair maiden in need of protection. How does that fit? How does that fit? And the guy's like, hey, good out. Cool. Let's go.
Yeah.
Like, like it's that kind of conversation.
I am a fan of that's what my character would do with an asterisk, as long as you're not being a dick about it.
Right, yeah. If you're not like, I would stab my friend's character in their sleep. Like, that's stupid.
Yeah, because we've all probably played with that guy of, well, that's what my character would do, and being a jerk.
Yeah.
I think we had one moment in a game that we were playing, where your character shot at another character. without giving any heads up, and me and friend of a pod, Zoshbox, are like, oh, well, we heard gunshots, we know what we have to do, which is open fire on the dudes we think are shooting at you.
Yeah,
It was this is what our characters would do, because we're not paying absolute attention, because we're getting dressed up in case things go sideways.
Yep.
Exactly.
So, further going on with... Oh, go ahead.
Oh. No. I can save it for a...
Oh, no, I was going to move on to the next point. So,
I was going to say, speaking of the character, just characters in general, I do think that this, if there was ever going to be a... how they give a lot of sheet music in Dragonlance for in supplement books and things for a lot of the songs and poems that come up. I see it now, and I'm like, I always think that this would be a great band name for a Dragonlance cover band. But it's from, I think it's Sturm's Powerful Strokes.
Oh yeah, that's a great tribute band name,
right? Like Sturm's Powerful Strokes and carried the boat out of range. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good band.
I used to play bass for Sturm's Powerful Strokes.
Damn right you did. So, we've mentioned
the bunnies. Tabletop. The bunnies would be a really good band name too, but that's later in the book.
We've mentioned a few times the tabletop connection of all of this. Are we liking how it's become obvious already, just in this latest encounter, that Raistlin's magic is super Vancian? He cast that sleep spell, and he was like, all right, you're not getting any more from me, you guys.
Yeah, it's gone. Yep. 100%. Class D&D.
I cast my 3 spells a day because I'm a first level wizard, and I am done.
Yep. Although, in AD&D terms, this is not. It's not spells per day. I just want to throw that out there for the grognards who are listening. Isn't it? We know. No, it's not spell points either. Although that rule was introduced at one point in books that would come out many years later. No, it's just. It just takes a certain amount of rest to recover spells of certain levels. So theoretically, like a wizard could cast the same spell multiple times in a day, but they would have to rest between castings.
I like that, and I wish this I wish this was a dedicated D&D RPG podcast, because I would get into this topic.
Yeah.
Final thing I want to talk about in this chapter before we start moving on. This one's for Austin specifically. Em, I know you and I have a lot of thoughts, but I want the definitive answer from Austin.
Yes.
The constellations are gone from the sky. Austin, what's that mean? Explain it to us.
Okay, so there are 2 constellations gone from the skies, the Queen of Darkness and the Valiant Warrior. Now, if we remember at the very beginning, there was this whole poem, the Catechism of Dragons, and I'm not saying that this is a throwback to that, where there was the Queen of Darkness who had to do a glorious combat with a Valiant Warrior of some kind, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But I think that's more or less kind of what's happening. It's a redux. It's a remake. The gods are coming back, and 2 of them were hanging out up in the stars. Now they're coming back to the mortal realms, and they're going to do glorious melee combat.
Do you think it's symbolic? Is it is there a new Queen of Darkness and hero, or are the old ones back?
I'm gonna go with it's more symbolic than literal, and I think it might have to do with avatars or something. But that is, again, me as a guy who's not read past chapter 7, who's not read past chapter 6. I'm just guessing from tropes I've read from other books in other forms of storytelling. That's kind of just my guessing.
Makes sense.
Does make sense. I want to get into something a little bit here that. So, like I mentioned for the one chapter, the first chapter, right, about how like they're really being diligent with their world building in the writing, giving you information about the world through characters' thoughts and actions and things. They're still doing it, but now we're seeing them do it. And again, if this was someone's first time reading, they wouldn't have this information unless they were already very familiar with the D&D world setting, right? they're leaving information out as part of their world building now intentionally, right? Like, we have them mention the constellations are gone, and Raistlin is like, the gods have come back. Like, the Dark Queen is here on Krynn now, and she has, and the Valiant Warrior has come back here as well to fight her. Like, they are here. These two gods are back, dude. And then everybody else is like, nah, no way. His brother's like, chill out, brother. And Tanis is like, nah, that's not possible. He's like, they're only a bunch of stars that disappeared, I guess, you know?
And that's not weird at all.
Yeah, and I mean, how much do you want to get in? How much are we able to get into the? I don't know how much. It doesn't really spoil anything, but it does give, I think, context from the world building about like the wizards of high sorcery specifically. But so edit this out if it's too spoilery. But you know, of course, we know that the wizards of high sorcery, in a world where the gods are supposed to have left and become inaccessible, the Wizards of High Sorcery have three gods, right? Who they worship, and the three gods of magic, and they've never lost communion with those gods.
Right.
So Raistlin, more than anyone, is like, he knows. Like, he did the test of High Sorcery. Like, he knows. He knows for a fact that the gods are real, right?
Yeah.
And so, of course, he's going to look and be like, nah, dude. The gods are here, man. And then everybody else is like, nah, that's not possible, actually. We would have found something on our quests if that was how it went down, you know? But Race is just like, nah. And so I just think that, like, by leaving that out, though, we can, like, think, like, oh, well, is Raistlin right? Or is he wrong? I don't know. It's like, nah.
Mm-hmm.
He's
right. I'm going with it.
He's right.
He's right.
He's 100% right.
Yeah. He knows all the stuff.
That is your first mistake. Doubting the edgy boy who lives in the corner of darkness.
He's the guy
7 out of 10 times
and is always right.
Yeah, like that is the one defining character trait is I'm always right because I'm an edgy teenager.
Yeah. But I also think for players it does show the value of not believing what another character says sometimes. Because it creates interesting story.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%. Because if again, it's that party dynamic of like, well, I don't really trust your character.
Sturm clashes somewhat with the paranoid Riverwind, but the Plains people otherwise find themselves fitting into the adventuring dynamic as though they'd always been part of the group. Tanis and Tasselhoff chat about navigation and where to go next. The road to Haven is the only obvious route to head for, yet the Theocrats' men will likely have it guarded. In the morning, the party splits what little food they have, and Tass pesters Flint about his sailing prowess. The group commits to escorting Riverwind and Goldmoon to Haven, and Tanis explains to them that he can get them into the elven kingdom of Qualinesti if the Seekers in Haven prove as violent as the one in Solus. Once more, the protective Riverwind wishes to take Goldmoon and leave, but Goldmoon overrules him once and for all. The group sets out, now fully committed to seeing this quest with the staff to its end.
Yeah, and we're gonna see the Undead Forest. I'm really looking forward to when that comes up, because, I don't know, writing 101, you're not gonna say, hey, there's this creepy forest full of dead dudes over there that we're not going to go invade.
Yeah, no. It's a cool forest.
Yeah.
It sounds like a pretty dope-ass forest.
There's a lot of cool forests in Dragonlance, honestly.
There are. They don't get enough love. There's, like, magical towers are always a thing, and they're a big thing in Dragonlance, but, like, no one talks about the magical forests that are associated with the magical towers. Like, each wizard tower has basically a wizard forest. And it's so cool. Like,
good stuff. I have vague memories of there being, like, I may be totally wrong, but I remember in, like, the largest city, there's a tower, and there's, like, a whole big, like, park around it that's just a forest.
Yeah.
And
I'd imagine it, because, I don't know, wizards like towers and forests.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and each forest somehow defends the tower, so, like, there's the forest that's full of undead. There's a forest that, like, I think does other stuff. Like, it's
Indeed.
In my magical wizard tower, I'm going to have a forest that's going to be defended by gargoyles.
There you go.
And there trolls. Good fucking luck, party.
So, pretty quickly into this chapter, we're given a bit of a clash of knightly honor from Sturm against Riverwind. We also see that he struggles against his code, and we start to understand why he has so much respect for Tanis. Obviously, we discussed this a little bit earlier, but does any of this kind of change how we see him? And this is especially for Austin, who's kind of meeting this character along the story as we read.
So, again, not overly for me, because I'm still getting used to Strum. And I don't know, like, I always enjoy that kind of personal conflict with the character and his moral code. And seeing how they either work within it or work around it. Mm-hmm. If that makes any kind of sense to y'all.
I also think it was a good moment of showing the growth of trust with Riverwind actually taking the initiative and apologizing, considering how paranoid he throughout all of this.
Yeah. I think that for me, it again highlights that Sturm is just as immature as as everyone else in the story so far.
Absolutely.
Right? He's got a lot of personal growing to do, evidently, because like literally all a dude does is say like, "Oh yeah, I'll stay up with you and like help, keep watch."
Yeah.
Like no biggie.
And it's the end of the world.
Sturm's like, "How dare you? What is it going to be? Swords, knives? Like, you know, it's time to fight." And it's like, whoa, calm down.
A little bit of an overreaction, but like, you know,
very rigid, right? And he's got the rigidity of someone who is new to a code, right? He hasn't had a lot of time to marinate with how he feels he should be in the world, and so he's overreacting, and he's being far too he's clinging too hard to his code,
absolutely,
and letting it rule him rather than living through it, you know. It's interesting to me.
It's the following the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law. Yeah, and I've got a funny feeling this is going to relate somehow back to his father. But that, again, is just me guessing. Yeah.
Right. And also it shows his insecurity, right? Which to me suggests, like for a character who's supposed to have a code of honor and to be part of this knightly order and all of these other things, like we would expect a certain amount of like self-assuredness, but now we see that he's actually like insecurity is probably his fatal flaw, at least for now, since he was about to go, you know, blade to blade with an ally over, you know, a very innocent offer to help.
Yeah, that's true. So speaking of our perceptions of things changing over time, the routes that they're going to be traveling have been getting discussed a lot in this chapter. Are you guys still convinced about the quality of the map we're working with here?
I'm a map
maybe a leading
fiend.
Question, but I'm sure not satisfied with the map when I'm trying to visualize where they're going.
Because I'm just looking at the map here on page 2 of my handy dandy book here. They're at the lake. Yeah. And on my handy dandy little map here, the lake isn't actually filled out.
No.
The lake stretches on into eternity. The entire world is a lake until you get to about the ocean.
Yep.
Because it's all the same. We don't have any lines.
They also say they go north of the town to the crossroads, and you look at that map and you're like, there's no crossroads north of that town.
Yeah, no, when you go north of Solus, you get to the lake and then the edge of a world. Because on my handy dandy little map, where there is a dragon that points north. Yeah.
Yep. Well, you know, it's like I said. It's like I said before. The map, right, is very. They even give it the little paper border. It's a diegetic image from the world, and maps are going to become one of these like weird. You know how like in Lord of the Rings they talk a lot about food and music. right? As just sort of like tangent, like world building tangents. They're like, oh, a culture, just to remind you that a culture exists. It's going to be the same thing with maps in Dragonlance. Maps is going to be that. So you're not wrong to feel that the map provided is inadequate, because you need to understand it as an image that someone from the world themselves like actually drew, right? And the reader, are being shown it. It's not what we would expect from a lot of setting guides, which is an accurate image of the world. This is, in fact, just somebody was on foot and drew a map like they did in the ye old Middle Ages.
Yeah. So, beside me, I don't have a second book, but I do have a third book, A Spring Dawning. And the map in Spring Dawning looks so much better. I really like it. It's a nice map.
Yeah. And there's going to be reasons for that.
Yep.
So, sorry, I'm a map fiend.
No, maps are great. I love maps. Mm-hmm.
I at one point seriously thought about becoming a cartographer, but that's a dying trait because of GPS.
Oh, I know who you're going to love a certain character way more eventually.
Oh yeah. So,
but yeah, no.
Yeah, back to the party. We see that Riverwind is pretty suspicious of non-humans. And we've also seen disagreements in the party about whether killing goblins counts as murder. Sturm seems to think it is murder. Caramon thinks it isn't. Kryn is a bit of a fantasy world where the different species are often suspicious of one another. How do we feel about this aspect of the story? Is it handled well? Especially considering that, like we discussed earlier, this is one of those subjects that modern fantasy has kind of moved away from in a lot of ways.
I guess I have to go first again, don't I?
Yes,
this is more of a broad opinion, but yeah, I mean,
so they do pretty specifically state that that Riverwind is a little racist. I not so much in that word, but like very distrustful of people who aren't human. Where Goldmoon, she's a little more chill. Again, there could be some problematic elements, but I'm just gonna kind of breeze right past that for right now. Mostly because in world building, it kind of makes sense. Like, you hang out with the folk that look like you, and in this case, humans. And if you're living in a part of a world where there are actual just marauding goblins, I kind of get like being suspicious of goblins and being like, well, killing a goblin isn't murder. They do it all the time to us. Where me, growing up in the city, hanging out with the goblins of Solace, who are just doing their job.
The goblins of Solace.
That's another.
The proximity of Dragonlance to, I think, Lord of the Rings is really important to consider in this regard, because it's also a lot like Middle Earth. It's one of these worlds where the different species of the different races all exist in. They all kind of live their lives in their own enclaves, right? So, like, the elves all live in these elven nations that are like forested and hidden away from the rest of the world, and the goblins and everything else are all in one. Are all living in like some horrible, scary kingdom that no one goes to because it's hostile to them, and all of this stuff. So like they wouldn't see each other very often, right? And so I kind of get that. And they're all different nation states on a relatively small continent, actually, when you think about it. And so they're often probably at odds with one another. What I do find interesting about it, though, is that, again, like a lot of early D&D, we see it in a lot of these D&D settings, Dragonlance, Greyhawk, etc., Forgotten Realms. We see a lot of diversity for humans specifically. Like in Dragonlance, you have a ton of human nations with their own languages, their own cultures, their own way of being, right? They're all very definitive. much like saying a goblin is always like this. Well, they're going to be like, well, a Solamnic human is always like this. But but also you don't see that same level of diversity among the non-human species as much. We sort of see some of it with dwarves and elves, which we'll get into. But other than them, one people is one people. And I think it's a pretty... But I also think for storytelling, I don't know. Would it overcomplicate the story?
It very well could, and one of the reasons why I when I'm looking at it is, as a human being, it is going to be easier for me to write about humans. Right? I am not a 1,000-year-old elf who probably doesn't care about silly things like nation states, race, gender, etc., because those things kind of don't matter when you live to be like 4,000 years old.
Right.
Well, and you'll find good.
Where, with us humans, we live like 60 years in most fantasy settings. And, Em, I'm sorry, but you're just about there. Can I have your stuff when you die at the tender age of 62?
Yeah,
wow.
No
Hell yeah.
He's coming right out and asking.
hey, I have it on record.
I should have asked first. Fuck. I was too busy being polite.
Yeah. I've got some stuff, I've got a lot of pens.
Can I just have that chair, though?
Yes. No, we're throwing... the chair is going into the fires of Mount Doom where it belongs.
What, this chair here, though?
Not if M wills it to me.
It's going into Mount Doom.
I will to you. It's yours, Will.
Thank you.
I'm after you.
Oh no! Finish your thought.
So that's kind of pretty much where I'm at, and we can also more easily get different examples of human civilizations from around the world that are drastically different from one another.
Yeah.
It could just be a little harder to write fantasy races like that. Now I'm going to shut up.
See, I think that we do. Again, I've read these books so many times throughout my life. We will see a degree of like diversification, but mainly from, I think, sort of the way D&D people tend to think about these things. Like, if you look at the goblins, even in Solus, in that first fight, right? Like, they were goblins, but, like, they weren't, like, marauding, like, we're gonna do whatever we want, ha ha ha, we are the forces of chaos and evil, ooh. Like, they still had to be ordered to attack, right? They still had to be told to do something, which suggests that they have this, ability to hold themselves back.
Because they're making... They're making minimum wage here, and they don't want to risk getting shanked for a silver an hour.
Right, yeah. And so like and we'll see it later on as well, this casual interactions with a lot of these species. And of course, this was part of how the game was played too back in the day, where you could parlay with enemies, but as a matter of course. So I think that they're not given a lot of diversity in terms of culture, but they are given like the implication of free will, I guess.
Yeah.
We don't see it because they're kind of unified. They're a unified front of people in a time of war, but like, I think outside of wartime, perhaps there would be room in the Dragonlance world for more casual interactions, people of these different races and things. I would like to believe anyway.
One of the aspects I really like about Dragonlance specifically is with the Kender. The Kender are one of, in my opinion, like the most like fully thought through inhuman psychologies I've seen in most fiction, especially in fantasy fiction, where they kind of take like some human traits and they crank them way the hell up to the point where those traits like now seem inhuman. In particular, Kender basically have uber ADHD.
Right.
And they do it in such a way where like they take this thing we're familiar with and they do it to such an extreme that it seems alien, and then they write a fantasy species like that, and I think it works really well. Because the Kender, as we learn more about them, especially in spin-off series, we start to see Kender are the most non-human of the species, really. From what I remember in Dragonlance.
In many ways, for sure, because they are, they have certain racial immunities, right, and other things, other characteristics that really separate them from every other species, which is because there are like specific elements of the human psychological experience, right? The way we interact and see the world and the way we respond to things in the world that the Kender literally just can't do.
Yeah.
And that, whereas like a goblin, a minotaur, whatever else, like those things, they all share the full gamut of human emotions, right? The Kender actually don't. And that does definitely make them very, very different, because of the one crucial, emotion that they lack. I agree with you. I think they are definitely the least human, the various races on Krynn, for sure.
Amazing. So we have run
to their characterization.
It's true. They all treat it a little bit differently, and it affects them all in certain ways.
Yeah.
So we have run for nearly 2 hours, so we may have to adjust our format a little bit next time. Sure, we don't run over so far.
Because boy howdy, I want to go to bed.
Yeah, we should get you to bed. Okay, so for the audience, our reading target next time is that we are reading all the way up to and including Chapter 10. So you're reading Chapters 7, 8, 9, and 10. And we will see you in 2 weeks.